Hello guys and girls, how's it going? Screwzilla here and I hope you're all well. And today we are in the M4A4 SA50 or the the M50 Super Sherman. Yes, the Super Sherman. Now this was a tank designed between the French and the Israelis. It's more of an Israeli tank than a French tank in all honesty. Now, I'm just going to switch to customization here and we'll just switch to a different decoration just to show it off in its glory. So this is a late M4A4 Sherman variant, some of the later models in the war, and it's been changed a little bit. It would originally have had the standard suspension and the Continental engine as well, but this caused a few issues. And when they were initially developing this tank, they sort of changed it around quite a lot. And wait, was it the Continental? Trying to think now. I think I might have got that wrong way around. But it basically had the original Sherman engine and suspension systems, and this caused problems due to the increased weight of the turret and the gun. It's a completely new turret design. As you can see here, it's a slightly different design, and it's got a slightly larger section at the back for the counterweight here. Also got a radio station in the back, but it's just to allow for that counterweight to work better. Now, it's a big old 75mm gun, and the best way to describe this is basically a French Firefly. It's pretty good. Armour-wise, it's not the best, but you do have some decent frontal armour. Effective thickness of 100mm, so you are going to be able to bounce some shots if you're down-tiered. Being 4.7, you can face anything from Panzers to Tigers. So when you're up tiered, it's very, very not fun, but you can still penetrate at least. But when you're down tiered, you do have some chances to block some shots. The turret armor is okay. The mantlet's pretty strong, as you'd expect. The turret thickness, relatively strong. You're going to bounce a fair few shots there as well. Side armor is pretty much non-existent, of course. And now if we look at the X-ray view, typical Sherman layout, we've got the commander, the gunner, and the loader, driver, and the machine gunner. Now, on this tank, you have a 7.62mm machine gun, so pretty standard, really. The big difference with this tank, though, was it originally had VVSS suspension, and this was a big problem, so they actually changed it to the HVSS suspension system. And that gave it much better mobility, and it needed it basically with that extra weight, so it made it a much stronger tank. It's quite a pretty looking Sherman. As I said, it's very similar to the Firefly in all honesty. Let's just quickly hop to Britain, pull up a Firefly. So you can see the Firefly, the Firefly here. Very similar looking tanks, really. The French has that slightly sleeker back section there. I think it has a slightly longer gun as well, and it has a flat breech instead of a round flat breech instead of a round breech. And if you look at the American HVSS with the 76mm, again, it's sort of all very similar in its sort of designs, you know. So, how does it perform? Well, I've had my first game in it. It's going to perform very much like a Firefly, really. That's it. Let's just hop to a replay here. Now, I would do a live game with you, but as you know, I'm pretty hopeless at that. So let's hop to the replay and go as we are. So, the history of this tank. In 1953, the Israelis bought the new AMX-13 light tank. The tank was armed with the high-velocity 75mm gun. While the gun was very satisfactory, the armour of the tank was considered too light. Eventually, Israel decided to purchase the AMX-13. However, in a parallel development, it decided to graft the powerful French gun onto the available, familiar, better armoured hull of the American M4 Sherman, the standard tank of the Israeli Defence Forces at the time. Just hop to the player view there. And this was the standard tank for them since the early 1950s. The project started in 1954, and in 1955 a prototype turret came from France to Israel. In March 1956, the Israeli Ordnance Corps facility started to convert the tank using guns received from France. The gun was known in Israel as the M50, and the upgun Sherman was designated the Sherman M50, or the Super Sherman. It's very similar to the Firefly in that it had the original turret of a smaller type, as used by the 75mm gun on the M3 Sherman, which was fitted with a larger counterweight at the rear end. So sort of the standard circular turret, and then they just cut a bit off and put the counterweight in there. The first 50 units were based off the M4A4 hulls and had the Continental 975 gasoline engine and the VVSS suspension as mentioned before. However, the increased weight of the vehicle combined with the narrow tracks led to poor performance off-road. It was also putting too much strain on the engine and caused quite a lot of failures. So the hulls were fitted with the HVSS suspension, and the Cummins V8 460 horsepower diesel engines were plopped in there. These sub-variants were sometimes referred to as the M50 Continental or the M50 Cummins. Diesel engines was also much rather preferred because it was much less flammable than petroleum, of course. Now, it had a bit of service, of course, being in Israel. Had service in Syria. Had service against the Egyptian army, which also had upgunned versions of the M4 Sherman. And they were fitted with the AMX-13 turrets. So the premium version of this was fighting it, which is funny enough. It's odd to think. One of the weird things we're going to have with French tanks is a lot of French tanks fought each other. The French, in realistic battle, could technically be on both sides, because you have the Free French and the Vichy French. So, yeah, it could possibly be in use there. Now, the M50 and M51 saw combat in the Six-Day War as well, in 1973, alongside much more modern tanks, of course. But the opposite side were also using T-34-85s, so it was it was a weird time in history. The M50 was retired in 1972, technically. As I said, did see some action in a few of the little wars later on. And they were completely phased out in the early 80s. They were actually sold to Chile. 100 or so tanks were sold to Chile. And some of those were in use up until almost the year 2000, when they were finally replaced by the Leo 1. And a few of them were still retained by Israel, and converted into engineering vehicles and self-propelled artillery guns. So that's really the story of the Super Sherman. It's kind of hard to call this one a French tank, really, because it's not. It's got a French gun, and it's got a French-designed turret. So that makes it more French than some of the other tanks. But it never served with the French, really. It served with the Israeli forces. Now, this truck is in trouble. There is a Chinu, I think it is, up there. And I'm trying to keep an eye out, of him. He pops around just before I can get the shot off, though. He manages to take out the truck. I do take out his gunner and machine gunner, though. So I'm going to need to move here because he's going to come around and flank me. So, first thing to mention on this tank, well, this is stock. So, first things first, it's a stock tank, what do you expect? But the shells from the French tanks have got some fantastic penetration values, and some really good muzzle velocity as well. 100 meters, sorry, 1,000 meters per second velocity. You know, you've got very good penetration. But the problem is fragmentation on these shells is really bad. And that's something I've been finding a lot with these French tanks. Hello, Chinu. You're looking over to the right there, are you? That's good. Hello. Boom. Take out his cannon barrel here, his commander and his loader. And now he can't really do much. I should have really aimed to the right to be safe. Or gone centre of mass like I did with that shot. Panzer IV there, managed to fluff his shot. Aim centre of mass. Beautiful shot there. And we actually get some good fragmentation through the front that time. But it's very unreliable. As I said, the fragmentation's pretty rough on the French tanks. This one's not been too bad, but I've noticed with especially with the ARL 40, the fragmentation is really, really rough. And that makes it quite hard to play and enjoy, which is a shame. The French tanks are going to be basically like the British tank grind. You know, it's going to be very painful. So just be prepared for a lot of your shots to do bugger all. You're going to do damage, you're going to penetrate, but you're not going to get those one-hit kills very often. Unless you get lucky and get an ammo rack. Now, of course, this is realistic battle, so I don't notice any name tags or things like that, but in this replay they are visible just so you can see what's going on in the battlefield. So there's an Ostwind, and I'm going to poke my head out around here, see what's coming around, because I expect somebody to come up to revenge kill. There's the Ostwind there. Now, I want to wait for him, I don't want to poke out, because this tank does not have a stabilizer. Yep, it's another French tank with no stabilization. Again, good centre of mass shot there, and we actually get the kill with one hit. But for some reason, the French don't believe in stabilizers. Well, because they weren't that reliable and they did have issues early on. In the game, they're a bit overly good sometimes, I find. In real life, they weren't quite as good. Now, there's a Panzer 4F2, I think it is, up there. There he is. We'll spot him in a second. There we go. We've seen him. He's not seen us. Shot straight through the turret. Take out the whole of his turret crew. And his gun. And he's just sitting there to repair. Now, I'm going to try and aim that shot a little bit lower. But hit the rock. It's okay, we've got time, and this is what I mean. The problem with fragmentation is it's very unreliable. You know, fragmentation could be easily taken out, hit a shell in that circumstance, but no, it doesn't. So we managed to hit his ammo, we managed to hit his gunner and take him out, and it's taken sort of 3 shots to do it. Plane comes in for a strafe. Luckily we don't receive any damage. Because being stock, we don't have any FPE or parts. Now this game's pretty much a loss at this stage. I could possibly get up to A, and that's what I'm going to try and do now, but being spotted, and I just see you through the corner of my eye, another Panzer. So I'm going to wait for my shot, wait for him to come around this Ostwind, and beautiful fragmentation there through the side of the tank. And that is the end of him. So we're going to try and rush up to A, but the game is ending very quickly, and I think we are going to be not making it. So all in all, this tank is pretty good. Without the stabilizer, it does make it very tricky. I don't think the Firefly has a stabilizer off the top of my head, because the longer gun did cause issues, but this was made in the 50s. You know, this is not a World War II era tank. This is a tank from the mid 1950s. So yeah, it's kind of a bit rough, but the gun is very good and the penetration is very good. You're going to be able to penetrate Tigers and things like that without too much fuss. Sorry, excuse me. So the Super Sherman, it's a good tank, and it's BR. It's not great, but it is a good medium tank. You'll probably have some good games in it. At 4.7, that's perfectly fine, really. As I say, it's the same as the Firefly. We'll just double check with the Firefly, actually. Let's just quickly take it into a test drive. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a stabilizer, but I do want to double check, because if it does, that's going to be a little bit annoying. I'll have to do some research to see if the actual other one does. No, it doesn't get a stabilizer. Good. Yeah, because of the longer barrel, it does not get that stabilization, so that's all good. But yeah, it's very much a Firefly, really. If you've played and liked the Firefly, then this tank is going to be very easy for you to pick up and use. As I say, it's very handy, really, and it does a good job. Okay, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give me a like, comment, subscribe if you did. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this tank when you get it, and I will see you next time. This is Screezilla out. Bye-bye.